Chapter 22. To be able to become the eldest daughter-in-law of Ding General Manor meant that she was extremely outstanding. In addition, she had been training in the backyard of Ding General Manor for nearly 10 years and assisted her mother-in-law in managing the household. Her skills and ability were better than most of the elders. Her pair of sharp eyes could be called fiery eyes. She only needed to see the nature of ordinary girls once or twice to know most of them. The number of times Luo Jingying came to Ding General Manor could be counted on one's fingers. She had seen her once, but that was the only time she said a few words. Like most girls, she was impetuous, greedy, and vainly tried to climb up the social ladder. Her inner ability was far inferior to her talent and appearance. Although the Luo family was not a particularly important family, they could not be ignored. If it were not for the fact that her mother-in-law was unable to leave, her mother-in-law would have come to greet her in person. Among the granddaughters of the Luo family, the only one who could catch the eye of this noblewoman was the eldest daughter who had already married. But today, she was a little surprised. She glanced at Jingwan without a trace and then looked at Madame Luo. Madame Luo's bearing was noble and graceful. Her eyes were still bright and spirited, without the slightest trace of turbidity. She was full of energy, qi, and spirit. It did not seem like she had been recuperating and had not come to the capital. Should she say that she was worthy of being the granddaughter that she had personally taught? Yesterday, she heard that this person had come to the capital. She also heard some surprising words from Madame Luo. She said that if Luo Jingying had not chosen to marry at that time, the madam in the backyard of Ding General Manor would have been Luo Jingying. Thinking about it, it was amazing. Madame Luo's choice that year surprised many people. On one side, she was a Tanhua scholar and her family was considered noble. She even had a cabinet minister, but that was in the previous dynasty. When Luo Peishan came to the capital, the Luo family basically had no foundation in the capital. On the other side, she was the heir apparent of Ding General Manor. If it was an ordinary person, they would have chosen without thinking about it. At that time, who knew how many people secretly scolded her for having water in her brain? However, anyone who knew about the situation at that time would probably not think that the Chen clan's choice was wrong. Yes, in their opinion, that was the Chen clan's choice, not his own choice. Speaking of the old madam of Ding General Manor, ever since the death of the old duke a few years ago, she had lived in seclusion and rarely met with outsiders. Even today, there were only a few people who could see her. If they were not Wang Fei and Jun Wang Fei of noble status, then it was the old madam who had a good relationship with her. But old Madame Luo, a complete stranger in the eyes of many people, received the same treatment as them. Those who saw her were all guessing which family she was from to have such an honor. They were also thinking about how to interact with her in the future. Old Madame Luo was also very surprised that old Madame's son wanted to see her. If she saw them like this, they would probably become the target of public criticism. People might even mistakenly think that the Sun family wanted to rope in the Luo family. To the Luo family, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. But old Madame Luo did not panic at all. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. In the battle for the air position, there were a few times when it went smoothly without bloodshed. It would be very difficult for the Luo family to completely stay out of it. When she learned that they were going to see old Madame's son, Wang Shi's heart tightened. She more or less understood the present situation. Although she did not think as thoroughly as old Madame Luo, she knew that this meeting could affect the Luo family. Luo Jingying, on the other hand, was nervous and excited. She had never met the old madam of the Sun family, but who didn't know her respected status in the Sun family? If she could catch her eye, she might be able to marry into Ding General Duke's mansion. What old Madame Luo could think of, Jingwan could think of as well. However, her thoughts were the same as old Madame Luo's. When she could not avoid it, she would face it head-on. She did not think too much and even had the leisure to enjoy the scenery along the way. The pavilions, the winding stream of flowing goblets, and the scenery in 10 steps was probably just like that. The Sun family was really full of flowers. There were not many people here with old Madame Sunday. There were only her 2 old sisters and the few juniors they brought. Those Wang Fei and Jun Wang Fei had already left. The person they really wanted to interact with was Duchess Ding. This old madam's health was not very good, so it was enough to be polite. In terms of status, old Madame Luo naturally had to bow. Quickly, rise. Old Madame's son hurriedly called for someone to help old Madame Luo up. Old Madame Luo did not feel anything. She had some friendship with old Madame's son when they were young, although it was not very deep. Old Madame's son was not so calm, especially when she saw that old Madame Luo's face was much younger than hers. Old Madame Luo was clearly older than her. It was not that she was jealous, but she felt a lot of emotions. They talked about the old days, and the scene was even harmonious. It seemed that their friendship was better than when they were young. Jingwan saw that old Madame's son wanted to say something several times but stopped. It seemed that she had something difficult to say. In the end, she could not help but speak. Back then, was it really your choice, or was it Elder Chen's idea? She did not care about the presence of the two old sisters, which showed that they were really close. As for the juniors, they did not know what she was asking, so they naturally did not care. Old Madame Luo was slightly startled. She did not expect old Madame's son to ask this. It seemed that she was quite persistent. She was already so old, so there was nothing she couldn't say. She smiled and said, "Naturally, I chose him myself." Back then, the heir of Duke Ding was very handsome and talented, but she didn't like him. Luo Peishan's family background was far inferior, but she liked him. Her family wanted her to marry down. In addition to the love of the elders and Luo Peishan's talent, the situation at that time was also one of the factors. However, it was not the main reason for her to marry down. Even if there was no Luo Peishan, it would be someone else. She would never marry the heir of Duke Ding at that time. "You are a courageous person," old Madame's son said. Duke Ding's mansion, how respected was the status? How many people could refuse that honor? Everyone said that she was lucky. Her family background was not the best, and she was not the most outstanding person. She was not even a candidate, but in the end, she got a big bargain. Was it really a bargain? Who knew what it was like to be a mother after marrying into the family? Who knew what it was like to be married for less than 3 months and her husband took back his sweetheart? Her concubine jumped around and schemed. Her eldest son almost died. She struggled as if she was in a quagmire. She became ruthless and unscrupulous. Her husband took in new favor one after another. In terms of virtuousness, who could compare with her? The sons of concubines came one after another. She raised them well. Even if she won in the end, her husband died, her son became the duke, and she became the most distinguished person in the backyard. So what? After entering Duke Ding's mansion, she had never been truly happy for a day. Luo Peishan only had one concubine's son, and he did not like him. Old Madame Luo had not been by his side for many years, and he did not pamper her. Everyone knew that the Luo family was strict, and Luo Peishan respected his wife. That was a blessing. Old Madame Luo was well aware of it, but she smiled and said nothing. "All the girls in your family are good-looking." Old Madame's son carefully looked at Jingwan and her two sisters. Jingwan did not want to deal with these shrewd old madams. She bowed her head in a timely manner to show her shyness. Luo Jingying, on the other hand, seemed to feel that she finally had a chance. She faced old Madame's son with a sweet smile. "Old Madame's son, you flatter me. Who in the capital doesn't say that sister son is the best?" Duke Ding had 7 or 8 brothers, but old Madame's son only had 2 sons. Sun Yijia was her only legitimate granddaughter. Sun Yijia was good-looking and smart, so she was naturally very fond of her. She was naturally happy to be praised, even if the person's thoughts were obvious. She smiled kindly and said a few words to Luo Jingying. However, when she saw that old Madame Luo did not ask anything, she knew that this girl was actually not liked by her. If she really cared about her, how could she be so indulgent? No matter how good her own children were, they would be modest and praise other people's children. This was normal. Old Madame's son's eyes paused on Jingwan for a while, and she also asked a few simple questions. She was less than Luo Jingying, and then Luo Jingyu. "I think it's better to ask them to go play. It's boring to accompany us old women here." Old Madame Luo knew that she had to stay to talk about this matter. She might have seen her before because of some persistence, but now she probably had a deeper meaning. She echoed old Madame Sun's words. Jingwan and the others, including Madame Wang, bowed and left. Chapter 23. Luo Jingying smiled brightly and greeted the other girls. They were all people she knew. Intentionally or unintentionally, she isolated Jingwan. As for Luo Jingyu, even if she was stabbed twice by this wooden man yesterday, she still didn't take her seriously. These girls were also smart people. When they thought of their sisters, what else did they not know? However, they didn't let Luo Jingying do as she wished. She chatted with Jingwan and slowly became familiar with her. Along the way, they also talked and laughed. Even Luo Jingyu was not left out. "Has your third daughter been engaged?" When they left the courtyard, old Madame Sun suddenly asked. "When I was in Qian Prefecture, I exchanged letters with my relatives. My third brother mentioned his eldest grandson's marriage earlier. I intend to marry my third daughter to him. A few days ago, she went to the capital to take the imperial exam and lived in my eldest brother's house. I also saw her yesterday. She is a good child. I was about to tell my third brother about their marriage. They will get married in 2 years." Old Madame Luo said. "That's a pity. I was thinking that if your third daughter hasn't been decided yet, she will be matched to my brother Lin." Hearing her words, the two old madams next to her couldn't help but show a strange expression. Sun Yilin was the 5th son of Duke Dinghua, the 3rd son of Duke Dinghua's wife, and the elder brother of Sun Yijia. He was 17 years old. Not only did he have a dignified appearance, but his talent and learning made him one of the 4 heroes of the capital. Among the 4, he was the youngest. It was fine if that was all, but his character was also first class. He had never been a virgin. Even Jin Shong, whose attitude towards the Sun family was somewhat ambiguous, really liked him. From time to time, he would call him into the palace to play chess. Every time, he would not return empty-handed. Such a person, even if he didn't inherit Duke Dinghua's mansion, his future was promising. Many unmarried women secretly admired him, not to mention those who wanted to climb up Duke Dinghua's mansion. Sun Yilin was simply a big piece of delicious fat meat. However, because he was too outstanding and his conditions were too good, ordinary people didn't dare to recommend their own family members. Just like the 2 old ladies who had a good relationship with old Madame Sun, they felt that their granddaughter wasn't good enough for Sun Yilin. Even if they were scratching their hearts and lungs, they endured it and didn't mention it to old Madame Sunday. This was definitely the first time old Madame Sun had taken the initiative to mention it. She must be joking, right? Fortunately, old Madame Luo refused. Otherwise, who knew how many people would vomit to death? Old Madame Sun mentioned such a girl whose father was not prominent and who was not very outstanding. Then what about her own outstanding daughters and granddaughters? The 2 old madams' hearts stirred. Perhaps this old sister of theirs did not have high expectations for Brother Lin's wife. In their eyes, old Madame Luo refused so straightforwardly because she didn't understand Sun Yilin's situation. Otherwise, even if her granddaughter was engaged, she would have secretly withdrawn. Friendship was important, but sometimes it was a joke. In fact, she knew a little about a young master like Sun Yilin, who was famous in the capital. If Sun Yilin wasn't born in the Sun family, old Madame Luo might be tempted by other families, even if their families were more complicated. However, it was the Sun family. The Sun family was extremely complicated. If she entered such a place, even if her husband doted on her, her WNWN wouldn't have a good life. Halfway through, Wang Shi was pulled away by someone she knew. She gave Jingwan and the others a few words. Jingwan and the others went to the garden where many young ladies lived. It was built by the lake. There were winding corridors and pavilions built on the lake. In the middle of the lake, a corner of the lake was covered with large lotus leaves. Although it was not the season for lotus flowers to bloom, it looked very charming. On the side, there were hundreds of flowers competing with each other. All kinds of famous products were intertwined. There were also rockery of different shapes. As for the peach forest further away, it was in full bloom. It looked like a fairyland. In twos and threes, women competed with each other. They were either admiring the flowers, feeding the fish, or whispering. However, the place with the most people was quiet. The woman who seemed to be surrounded by stars seemed to be painting. Her eyebrows were lowered, and she was serious and beautiful. Needless to say, that was Sun Yijia. Luo Jingying walked over quickly. After a few steps, she seemed to have thought of something and turned around. Third sister, fifth sister, I saw two good friends. I want to go over and say hello. Look, you go. Don't worry about us. We'll just take a look. Jingwan didn't ask Luo Jingyu and said on her own. This. Luo Jingying seemed to be a little embarrassed. How about we go together? I'll introduce them to you. You sisters have a lot to talk about. Even if you want to introduce them to us, you don't have to be in a hurry. She said good friends, so they were naturally good friends. However, Jingwan was really not interested in knowing her good friends. Third sister, if you have anything to say, just send someone to tell me. Okay. Jingwan smiled and nodded. She wanted to show a deep sisterly love. At the moment, Jingwan didn't mind accompanying her. Luo Jingying nodded apologetically to the few people next to her and then left. Sure enough, she pulled two good friends and asked them what they were talking about. A girl next to Jingwan suddenly smiled and said, I've seen your second young lady before. She's very protective of your fourth young lady. Why didn't she come with you today? It's almost second sister's big day. Oh, she's embroidering the dowry at home and doesn't go out. I seem to remember that your third sister likes simple and elegant clothes. She's usually like a fairy. Why did she change her preferences today? Your second sister, on the other hand, is quite solemn. Liking good things naturally won't stay the same. Even if it's a preference, it won't always stay with her, right? Second sister is indeed a good sister. If Luo Jingqiang wasn't good, would she be willing to become Luo Jingying's little attendant? If she wasn't good, would she be able to wear old Chen's clothes and become a green leaf to set off Luo Jingying, this delicate flower? How many girls didn't like to be delicate and charming? Every family had a similar situation. It was just that it wasn't obvious. Everyone was well aware of it. WN, Jingwan looked towards the direction of the voice. It was a familiar voice. Sure enough, it was eldest aunt's cousin Yuan Xiao Xiao. She quickly walked in front of her. Cousin. Xiao Xiao and Jingwan are cousins? The girl who spoke to Jingwan just now was very surprised. That's right. My mother's surname is Luo. Wan and I are blood-related cousins. Yuan Xiao Xiao hooked her arm around Jingwan's arm. Ingshuang, Wan has become familiar with you since she first came to the capital. Wan and I also hit it off very well when we first met. It's clearly fate. I didn't even know that your maternal grandfather was Luo Shangshu. Ju Ingshuang seemed to be a little angry. Yuan Xiao Xiao very ungracefully rolled her eyes at her. We only knew each other before. Our true friendship only happened a month ago. You didn't ask me about my family's situation. It's not too late to find out now. Ju Ingshuang wasn't really angry. You and Jingwan are cousins, and so are you with Luo Jingying. Why do you act like you don't know her? Otherwise, I would have known that you were related to the Luo family. I don't like her. Why would I bother with her? Yuan Xiao Xiao had actually made it clear to Luo Jingying that they should act like they didn't know each other outside. If she came looking for them, they shouldn't blame her for embarrassing her. Luo Jingying had her own pride. In addition, her mother always wanted to be on good terms with her eldest aunt. Naturally, she didn't dare to make her presence known in front of Yuan Xiao Xiao. You're still like this. You don't even know how to hide it. Ju Ingshuang was quite helpless with her temper. I can't help it. I'm just like this. Yuan Xiao Xiao said carelessly. Let's go. Let's talk over there. With one in each hand, she pulled Jingwan and Ju Ingshuang away. She didn't care about the people around her. Therefore, Yuan Xiao Xiao was sometimes really hated by people. Ju Ingshuang could only wave at them, indicating that they could do as they pleased. Yuan Xiao Xiao excitedly told Jingwan about the no discord, no friendship between her and Ju Ingshuang a month ago. Jingwan listened quietly and smiled. It was really a small quarrel between young girls. With her age and life experience, it was naturally impossible for her to be as lively as them. However, she didn't mind being a good listener. After talking about interesting things, the three of them began to admire the flowers in the garden. The further they walked, the fewer people there were. As expected of Duke Ding's mansion. What kind of flowers are these? I've never seen them before. But they look really beautiful. Yuan Xiaoqiao reached out and touched the beautiful flowers in front of her. Jingwan smiled faintly and then began to explain to Yuan Xiaoqiao the names of the flowers, their characteristics, their value, and so on. She was not in a hurry and was very detailed. Yuan Xiaoqiao looked at Jingwan in amazement. Wan, you're amazing. You know so much about them. Zhu Yingshuang also couldn't help but nod. I just like them, so I know more about them. Chapter 24. Young Master Lin. Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhu Yingshuang were both surprised and overjoyed at the same time. The two words involuntarily slipped out of their mouths. Yuan Xiaoqiao even restrained her temper and instantly turned into a virtuous lady. Greetings to the three ladies. Sun Yilin greeted. Jingwan squatted and returned the greeting. Greetings to the young master. The two girls who seemed to be infatuated with him returned to their senses and greeted him. However, it wasn't entirely their fault. It was normal for a handsome young master like him to attract the admiration of young ladies. This one is also a lover of flowers. Just now, I passed by and overheard the ladies' conversation. I was so happy that I acted abruptly. Please forgive me. I only hope that I didn't disturb your mood. Sun Yilin was truly apologetic. However, it was obvious who he was targeting. However, the two girls who shook their heads didn't seem to notice. We didn't disturb you. Young master doesn't need to mind. Jingwan felt helpless at their reactions. That's good. Sun Yilin wanted to say something else, but the servant behind him whispered something. Sun Yilin turned around and looked into the distance. I originally wanted to ask the young lady for advice, but I'm afraid I'll have to wait for the next time. I hope the young lady won't be stingy with her advice. Young master is too polite. This one will take his leave first. Sun Yilin bowed again before turning to leave. All right, he's already far away. It's time to return to your senses. Jingwan waved her hand in front of the two girls. When the two girls saw her teasing them, they felt anger in their hearts. They looked at each other and reached out to tickle her. Jingwan hid while begging for mercy. The three of them were in a mess. Which slut is so shameless to openly seduce Brother Lin in public? An extremely arrogant and domineering voice sounded. The three girls stopped and looked towards the source of the voice. A woman dressed in red, her body like fire, was angrily rushing towards them. When she was only a few steps away, the whip in her hand had already lashed out. The whip was clearly covered with thin thorns. If it hit the body, it might split open the flesh. If it hit the face, Jingwan and the others were pulled from behind by someone, and they barely managed to avoid it. It turned out that when they saw the situation, the maidservants and memars who were not far away hurried forward and pulled the three people apart in time. But when the first whip missed, the second one fell. A maidservant rushed out from behind Jingwan and the others and directly faced the whip. She grabbed it tightly and wrapped it around her arm twice before hugging it tightly. Miss, how can you be so unreasonable? This person was none other than Jingwan's maidservant, Qingju. This maidservant was a little reckless, but she was truly loyal to her master. Whether it was Zhu Yingshuang, Yuan Xiaoqiao, or even the woman, they all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Let go. The woman withdrew her hand, but the whip did not move an inch. No. Qingju didn't care about her bleeding hand, and didn't care about the identity of the woman in front of her. She only knew that if she let go, she might hurt her young lady, so she was determined not to let go. How dare you? Why aren't you pulling this bitch away? I don't care if you beat her to death. The group of maidservants behind the woman stepped forward and waved their hands to hit Qingju's face. Jingwan was furious. She already knew who this woman was, but it was really better to see her in person than to hear about her. This was the first time she had met such an unreasonable person. She wanted to step forward to help, but was stopped by Mammy Gong. "Miss, please step back. Let this servant do it." Seeing Jingwan's doubtful gaze, Mammy Gong said, "Don't worry, miss. This servant has learned some martial arts." Sure enough, Mammy Gong stepped forward and blocked the maidservants. Just as she was about to remove the whip from the woman's hand, "Ruyu, what are you doing? Quickly stop." The woman with the youthful voice was flustered and exasperated. It was Sun Ijia, followed by a large group of people. The woman, who had always been calm and aloof, had anger in her eyes and walked faster than usual. When Sun Ijia came closer, Qingju had already let go of the whip under Mammy Gong's signal. When Sun Ijia saw the blood on the whip, anger rushed to her head and she felt waves of headache. She looked around and saw that only a maidservant's hand was injured. She heaved a sigh of relief. "Why are you hitting people again?" Faced with Sun Ijia, the woman didn't continue to swing the whip. However, her temper didn't subside. "Why don't you ask these bitches what they did? They're all lowly creatures who secretly tried to seduce older brother Lin. Don't they deserve to be hit?" No matter how good a person's temper was, they would still fly into a rage after hearing this. Jingwan's face darkened. "Miss, you should watch your mouth. So you're saying that the bitch is you?" The woman pointed the whip at Jingwan. "Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror? How dare you try to get close to older brother Lin? Older brother Lin likes flowers. Do you think that you can fly to the branch and become a phoenix just because you showed off a little?" Jingwan could still hold back, but Yuan Xiaoqiao was about to explode in anger. She wanted nothing more than to rush up and tear the woman in red apart. Jingwan pulled her back. She was the one who caused this trouble. The other party was of noble status. If they became enemies, they would often find trouble in the future. She didn't want Yuan Xiaoqiao to be implicated as well. However, it was said that beautiful women were the source of trouble. In fact, beautiful women were also the source of trouble. "I recognized flowers when I was 3 and grew flowers when I was 5. It can be said that flowers are my companions every day. However, I just arrived in the capital a few days ago and I don't know many people in the capital. Who am I showing off to? Which noble branch did I climb up to? On the other hand, you, miss, look like someone of noble status. However, you're vulgar and rude. You don't have the slightest bit of propriety and upbringing that a woman of the boudoir should have. If I were the older brother Lin you mentioned, I would definitely stay as far away as possible from people like you. I don't want to be associated with you and make myself look vulgar." The woman in red was so angry that her whole body trembled. "You really have guts. You dare to speak to this imperial princess like this." Many people broke out in cold sweat for Jingwan. They knew clearly what kind of person she was. Normally, she was unruly and willful. Whenever she was associated with Sun Yilin, she would become like a mad dog. Naturally, there were also people like Luo Jingying. They were indescribably happy and couldn't wait for Jingwan to thoroughly anger the woman in red. It would be best if she smashed her face with a whip. Imperial princess. When others thought that Jingwan would give in, Jingwan sneered. "As a woman of the imperial family, you should be a role model for all the women in the world. However, with someone like you, other than tarnishing the reputation of the imperial family, what else can you do?" "You." Unable to restrain her anger, the whip was about to strike again. "Li Ruyu, do you dare to try?" Sun Yilin's gentle voice became somewhat gloomy as he returned. Li Ruyu's hand trembled and she immediately hid the whip behind her back. When she looked at Sun Yilin, she already revealed a charming smile. "Lin Gij, why are you here? Don't you also have guests today?" The person who was usually gentle like Jade now had a sullen face. "You are indeed vulgar, rude, and rude. Not only tarnishing the reputation of the imperial family, but also disgracing our Sun family. I don't care about your usual behavior, but you are becoming more and more unscrupulous. I will clearly tell you now, even if I, Sun Yilin, become a monk in this life, I will never take you, Li Ruyu, as my wife." Everyone knew that Li Ruyu liked Sun Yilin. However, because the two of them were of noble birth, there were some things that they didn't say. Even though they knew that if Li Ruyu really married Sun Yilin, it would be a waste of a good man, no one dared to say anything. Moreover, the two families didn't make a clear statement, ambiguous and unclear. However, today's banquet seemed to be announcing some kind of decision to the world. Originally, they thought that after today, perhaps Sun Yilin's marriage would be clear. However, before the banquet ended, Sun Yilin suddenly became so resolute and directly tore off Li Ruyu's face, throwing it on the ground and ruthlessly stepping on it. With so many people present, it was impossible to seal the mouth. After today, Li Ruyu would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire capital. Li Ruyu was as if she was struck by lightning. Lin Gij, you. I did this all because of you. Why are you so heartless? Don't say that it's because of me. I can't bear this kind of reputation. The little bit of relationship between us was already worn away by you. As for being heartless, can it be compared to you who casually stains people's blood and takes people's lives? I will personally talk to my aunt and ask her to find 2 etiquette instructors for you. If you can't learn the rules, it's best that you never appear in front of me, so as to avoid making people feel disgusted. A person who was usually modest and polite was even more venomous when he spoke. Chapter 25. You believe aunt's words to coax a 3-year-old child? There should be a limit to self-deception. At this moment, Sun Yilin was really cold and heartless. Seeing Li Ruyu's pitiful appearance, Sun Yijia couldn't bear it. She wanted her brother to speak less, but when she saw Sun Yilin's face as calm as still water, and his eyes were filled with anger, impatience, and disgust, Sun Yijia chose to keep her mouth shut. She also didn't like Li Ruyu, her cousin, and didn't want her to be her sister-in-law. It would be best if she could make her give up after today. Otherwise, it would be good if she could change her temper. Brother Lin, how could you do this to me? You can't. Li Ruyu spoke incoherently. Her hair was a little messy, and her expression was a little dazed. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something. It's that bitch, isn't it? You've been bewitched by her. You must have been bewitched by her. I want to kill her. Li Ruyu madly rushed towards Jingwan. Sun Yilin grabbed her and gave her a forceful shove. If it weren't for the servant girls blocking her, she would have fallen to the ground. Immediately send your princess back to the prince's residence. Later, I will personally visit aunt. Oh, the Duke of Ding's residence is really unusually lively today. Before Li Ruyu's people could respond to Sun Yilin, another person interrupted. However, what surprised Jingwan was that even though it was a very pleasant voice, everyone present, including Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhu Yingshuang, couldn't help but stiffen. It was as if their natural enemy had arrived. The one with the most obvious reaction was Li Ruyu. She wasn't as arrogant and domineering as she was at the beginning, nor was she dazed after the painful blow. She was like a little chick that had been fished out of the water, trembling involuntarily. What was even stranger was that she frantically wiped away her tears. Jingwan was shocked. Who was this person? How could he be so powerful? Sun Yilin took a deep breath, then turned around. Greetings to the 3 Imperial Highnesses. May the Imperial Highnesses live for thousands and thousands of years. With him taking the lead, everyone else followed suit and paid their respects to the 3 Imperial Highnesses. You may rise. The eldest prince, Prince Kang, helped Sun Yilin up. May I know why the 3 princes have come? As the host, even though Sun Yilin was in a bad mood because of Li Ruyu, he still had to raise his spirits to deal with it. What? The threshold of Ding General Duke's mansion is even higher than the Imperial Palace. Can't I step in for no reason? Li Hongyuan said with a faint smile. Among the 3 of them, he was the last one. He shouldn't have spoken, but he didn't seem to take his 2 elder brothers seriously. Sun Yijia could only be mentally and physically exhausted in the face of this living king of hell. Your Highness must be joking. She knew that she couldn't say that, but she didn't dare to follow his instructions. If she dared to say not hi, Li Hongyuan could go in and out of Ding General Manor as if it were his own. Even if it was the backyard, she couldn't expect him to avoid taboo. Do you think this prince is joking with you? Li Hongyuan leisurely walked in front of Sun Yilin. What was Li Ruyu? She was the one who was truly unreasonable. So insolent. Jingwan already knew the other person's identity. The current emperor's sixth son, Su Guifei's adopted son, Li Hongyuan, the Jin Qinwang who was said to have a bad reputation. When he was young, he was a famous devil incarnate. As he gradually grew up, he became the living king of hell. Whoever provoked him would be unlucky. Jingwan knew that if she met Li Ruyu, she would only have endless troubles in the future. If she met this one, she might bring disaster to the entire Luo family. So she lowered her eyes and tried to reduce her presence as much as possible. However, she always felt that there was a line of sight that fell on her from time to time, as if she was being watched by someone. Besides, Li Hongyuan, no matter what his heart was like, he would never let people know that his attention was on Jingwan. He didn't care about Sun Yilin who was frozen and didn't know how to answer him. He directly walked in front of Li Ruyu. What happened to Ruyu? Did Sun Yilin bully you? Tell sixth brother will help you teach him a lesson. Not to mention Sun Yijia, even Kang Wang's breathing became sluggish. He was afraid that Li Hongyuan would take the opportunity to make things difficult for Sun Yilin. On the other hand, Wang was leisurely watching from the side. If Li Hongyuan really crippled Sun Yilin, he would sincerely call him sixth brother. Many thanks for Wang Yi's concern. Nothing happened to Ruyu. Is that so? Li Hongyuan took the whip from her hand and raised it to gently rub her neck. Although he wasn't clear about the details, but looking at the current situation and thinking of Li Ruyu's personality, it was obvious that the person in his heart was bullied. Then he thought of his previous life, Jingwan's tragic end. This woman also played an important role. With the new hatred and old hatred, Li Hongyuan almost couldn't suppress his anger. He really wanted to wring her neck. Sure enough, the lesson he gave her was far from enough. The thin thorns on the whip scraped her skin. It was a little painful, but Li Ruyu didn't dare to dodge. Even if Li Hongyuan's attacks were getting heavier and heavier, she still endured it. She felt that this cousin was like a ferocious beast right now. He could swallow her alive in the next moment. It was more terrifying than ever. Li Ruyu was about to cry, but she didn't dare to. He hated women crying. The more pitiful they cried, the more miserable their ending would be. Ruyu, it's not good for a girl to play with a whip. You should be at home copying the women's commandments, learning the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, or embroidery is also good. You are an imperial daughter. How can you do something as degrading as hitting people? Don't do this again in the future, okay? In 3 months, you will let the world know that you are the most qualified imperial daughter, right? He couldn't kill her, but that didn't stop him from using a blunt knife to cut her soft ribs. His voice was so pleasant that it made people feel numb all over. It was as if he was whispering in the ear of his beloved. It was so gentle that Li Ruyu almost couldn't stand still. His whole body kept trembling, and he began to stutter. Your Highness is right. Ruyu will definitely be the most. Are you cold? Then go back early. Girls can't be cold. If you hurt your body, what will happen if it affects your children in the future? Li Hongyuan lightly interrupted her words. However, the meaning in those words was enough to make any girl feel fear. The most gentle words could be the most deadly poison. Your Highness is right. Ruyu will leave. If you don't do as he says, he will most likely make his words come true. Good girl. Li Hongyuan took a step back and casually waved the whip in his hand. The tip of the whip cut through Li Ruyu's clothes and hit a maidservant with a bang. The maidservant's clothes were torn and her flesh was exposed. The maidservant let out a short scream and hurriedly covered her mouth. The pain on her body was not important, but the fear in her heart was suffocating. Regarding these princes and princes, Jingwan had a very general understanding from Nanny Gong. This was her first time as a bystander, so she had a more intuitive understanding of them. They were temperamental, cruel, and ruthless. If possible, it was best to never face them directly. If it was someone else, there might be a possibility that this wish would come true. As for Jingwan, she had been targeted by the great demon a few years ago. How could he let her escape from his palm? She still didn't know, so she should enjoy her freedom for the time being. When the great demon made his move, she would suffer. After sending Li Ruyu away, Li Hongyuan's eyes lazily looked around at the people present. There are quite a lot of beauties. His words made many people subconsciously step back. They were annoyed and regretful. Why did they come to join in the fun? Wasn't it better to learn from those who didn't come? Prince Jin, aren't you a hardcore supporter of noble consort Su? Why did you come to Duke Ding's residence for no reason? Li Hongyuan saw the crowd's reaction and sneered. A bunch of self-righteous women. He had been blind for a long time in his previous life. How could he continue to be blind in this life? Even if she was really a heavenly beauty, she couldn't compare to a single finger of his WNWAN. He raised his chin slightly and seemed to look down on the crowd. In fact, he only saw a figure. It was as if he could bury everyone except himself and WNWAN alive. Then he could hug WNWAN and do whatever he wanted. Therefore, he, Li Hongyuan, was so unreasonable now. His heart was so dark. The feeling of being targeted became more obvious. This time, it was definitely not an illusion. Jingwan frowned slightly. Seeing that the situation was in a deadlock, Prince Kang gave his third brother a look, telling him to discipline this bastard. Chapter 26. I didn't know that several Wangye had graced us with your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Several old Furen were supported by others. They looked a little out of breath, with slight sweat on their foreheads. It was clear that they had rushed over. Jingwan looked at old Furen Luo's appearance and her complexion was not good. Although when she was in Qian Fu, she also made her grandmother move more and sweat more, but the current situation was forced. Naturally, it was impossible for her to be happy. Li Hongyuan saw Jingwan's expression. In the previous life, he was not clear about the matters before Jingwan's marriage, but one thing had never changed. That was, old Furen Luo's sincere love for Jingwan. To let this old Furen suffer, Jingwan could not help but remember it in her heart. For Wn Wan's sake, he did not mind showing her some respect. Seeing that several old Furen were about to kneel, enough, stand. A group of young ones did not kneel to Ben Wang, but a group of old ones kneeling. Do you want Ben Wang's life to be shortened? Well, it was obviously good intentions. After saying these words, who could understand his good intentions? He even overturned a group of young ones. They were all hesitating whether to make up for this big ceremony of kneeling. Whatever the living king of hell said, it was naturally what it was. Naturally, it would not be good to kneel in the name of asking for forgiveness. Old Furen's son stood calmly. These people were old and experienced. In fact, they all saw it clearly. Although Jin Qinwang was a scoundrel, he still kept his bottom line. He would not touch people who should not be touched. Even if he did, it was usually to teach them a lesson. He rarely killed or crippled them. Several Wangye, why don't you come to the inner hall and have a cup of tea? Old Furen's son said. The garden is very good. Ben Wang heard that old Madam's son wants to choose a granddaughter-in-law. Why don't we let them perform well in the garden so that Ben Wang can see what kind of girl is worthy of the future pillar of our Qiyuan dynasty? Maybe Ben Wang can help. Ben Wang may not have other abilities, but when it comes to choosing a woman, I think I still have some eyesight. Old Madam's son sighed in her heart. A good banquet had been ruined by this king of hell. Originally, she wanted to use this opportunity to choose a granddaughter-in-law, but it was not only for Sun Yilin. She also had a few grandsons who had reached the age of marriage. Although they were not as good as Sun Yilin, she still wanted them to do well. Now, it had become a wife selection banquet for Sun Yilin. Perhaps he could really settle his beloved grandson's marriage today. That would be good too. Because Sun Yilin was too outstanding, his mother always wanted to give him the best. However, his father was worried that the power behind him was too strong and had greater ambitions, coveting the position of Duke Ding and causing the brothers to turn against each other. Therefore, he wanted to suppress him, and those 7 aunts and 8 aunts also wanted him to become a son-in-law. Many parties were in a deadlock, so the person was delayed. Now that Jin Qinwang intervened, no matter who was chosen, everyone could only pinch their noses and recognize it. Your Highness's eyesight is naturally not bad. Then I will have to trouble your highness. Niang. A slightly sharp voice sounded. Looking for the source of the voice, very good. Several Wang Fei, Jun Wang Fei, and Duchess Ding took the lead. A group of noble women finally arrived. The scene was really getting more and more lively. Li Hongyuan's last words were heard by Duchess Ding, but she could only suppress her anger and pay her respects first. Li Hongyuan nodded. As for the Wang Fei, who was an elder, he just perfunctorily cupped his hands, but no one picked a bone because of it. Jin Qinwang, marriage should be the order of the parents and the words of the matchmaker. Even the emperor can't rashly decide the marriage of an official, not to mention you are just. Duchess Ding was really angry. She couldn't understand, how could her own old madam compromise with the other party? Others were afraid of him, but how could Duke Ding be afraid? Li Hongyuan smiled indifferently. That smile without any negative emotions really had the feeling of captivating all living things. He didn't look at Duchess Ding, but beckoned to Sun Yilin, come here. Sun Yilin exhaled, composed himself, and stepped forward. What is Wang Ye's order? Li Hongyuan reached out and put his hand on the back of Sun Yilin's neck. How about staying in this Wangfu for 7 days? Jin Qinwang, Duchess Ding's voice was sharp and somewhat harsh. When she said 7 days, who wouldn't think of 7 days of favor? He didn't cripple Sun Yilin, let alone kill him. The other party just invited him to stay for 7 days. Even if it was in front of the emperor would at most scold him. Jin Qinwang loved beauties, regardless of gender. It was good to know these things. If it was really made out, then it would really be a loss of face. The emperor would never allow it. Playing around in private, the old man wouldn't care, but it was related to the imperial family's face. Even Duke Ding couldn't afford it. For Duchess Ding, there was nothing more threatening than this. I'll have to trouble Wang Ye to choose a wife for my son. Duchess Ding said, almost gnashing her teeth. Well said. Li Hongyuan retracted his hand and responded indifferently. Li Hongming, Prince Rui, was about to clap his hands and cheer. For him, Sun Yilin had no official position or title, but he couldn't stand Fu Huang liking him, so the threat multiplied. Now his marriage was held by his own people. He really wanted to go forward and pat Li Hongyuan on the shoulder and say, good sixth brother. To be honest, Li Hongyuan was annoying, but when he did things, he was deeply popular. The efficiency of the servants of Duke Dinggua's mansion was also first class. As soon as he gave the order, by the time everyone went over, the area by the lake had been completely rearranged. In the process, the children of each family basically found their own adults and didn't dare to laugh as before. When Madame Luo came, she saw Jingwan in the innermost position. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't worried. However, now was not the time to ask. She just patted her hand and stroked her slightly messy hair to comfort her. Jingwan also shook her head at Madame Luo, indicating that she was fine. When no one was paying attention, she whispered a few words in Madame Luo's ear, Sun Yilin, Hua, Li Ruyu. In summary, it could be summed up in 4 words: an unexpected disaster. These words were enough for Madame Luo to understand most of it. Her eyes flashed slightly, but she remained calm. At this moment, Madame Wang came over with her eldest daughter who was married. Madame Luo hadn't seen her eldest granddaughter for many years. She looked at her carefully and saw that her face was ruddy and she was dressed properly. It meant that she didn't suffer any grievances in her husband's family, so she was relieved and kept her by her side. After Jingwan nodded, Qingju followed the servants of Duke Ding's mansion to treat the wound on her hand. Fortunately, it only looked serious, but the actual situation was much better. On the other side, Kang Wang and the Sun family stayed behind a little. Wang Yi, why did Jin Qinwang suddenly come to our Duke Ding's mansion? Old Madame Sun asked. Kang Wang was also angry with Li Hongyuan, sometimes wanting to eat him alive. In reality, he could only think about it. Before he came, he tried to dissuade him, but that bastard just liked to go against him. Don't talk about forcefully stopping him. Even if his attitude was a little tougher, that bastard could make a scene outside the imperial study. He was just smashing a broken jar and didn't care about whether Fu Huang would punish him or not. But Kang Wang couldn't and didn't dare. Faced with his own grandmother's inquiry, he could only forcibly suppress his anger. Today, he entered the palace to see imperial concubine Su and also paid his respects to Muhu, but he didn't pay his respects to Fu Huang. Fu Huang angrily scolded him for being unfilial and called him to the imperial study. In front of several courtiers, he scolded him. When he came out, he told Ben Wang that he heard that there was a banquet at Duke Ding's mansion today and came over. As for Li Hongming, Kang Wang sneered, the meaning was self-evident. Very good, their Duke Ding's mansion was purely implicated by the emperor. Jin Qinwang was angered by his own father and happened to meet Kang Wang, who then caught Duke Ding's mansion. So, if you weren't unlucky, who would be unlucky? But the root of the disaster was the emperor. Even if they wanted to secretly retaliate, they couldn't, so they could only endure it. It was just that Sun Yilin was wronged. Old Madame Sun looked at her beloved grandson and sighed softly. And Duke Ding's Furen, who was usually a strong-willed woman, was about to cry when she saw her son at this time. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have been so picky and decided on a daughter-in-law candidate early. Then, there wouldn't have been today's disaster. In any case, in their view, Li Hongyuan would definitely not choose a good girl for Sun Yilin. Fortunately, among the girls present today, even the worst one still had some redeeming qualities. Chapter 27. In fact, they really thought too much. Li Hongyuan came to Ding Guofu purely because the person he wanted to see was here. To him, being scolded by his imperial father was nothing compared to wind passing by one ear and one ear. How could he be angry because of this? As for the other unexpected situations after he came, it was just a matter of convenience. Sun Yilin, seeing that he helped Jingwan out of her predicament, seeing that he was indeed a pillar of the country in the future, he really didn't want to make things difficult for him. After receiving the comforting words from his younger sister and cousin Kang Wang, Sun Yilin smiled. He really didn't care. That's right, Niang, our Fu should be properly cleaned up. I just said a few words to someone and didn't go far when Li Yu came to find trouble with them. In the end, who told her? If the people in the Fu can be easily bought by her, then they can be bought by people outside. In this way, as long as there's a bit of trouble in our Fu, wouldn't it immediately be known to the world? Duchess Ding Guofu's face sank. My son, don't worry, this kind of thing won't happen again. If it wasn't for Li Yu making a ruckus, even if Jin Qinwang came, it might not have attracted his attention. He couldn't afford to provoke Jin Qinwang and couldn't deal with Li Yu. But to deal with the traitors in his Fu, it was as simple as crushing ants. The guests who came to Ding Guofu, including those who didn't go to see the excitement before, were all gathered together. The men's and women's seats were separated. There weren't many people in the men's seats, but they were the object of everyone's attention. Whether it was those unmarried girls or their elders, there weren't many who didn't have complicated feelings. Perhaps they were excited and nervous because they knew what their own conditions were. Under normal circumstances, they absolutely had no chance to become Sun Yilin's DI wife. Now that Jin Qinwang intervened, the most unlikely person was more likely. If they could marry such a person, they could suddenly get what countless women wanted in their lifetime: a noble status, glory, splendor, wealth, and an outstanding husband. Perhaps they were conflicted and embarrassed because they originally had a chance, but now it seemed bleak. But to give up like this, they were very unwilling. And to perform in public, for them, was simply playing to the gallery. What was the difference between this and humiliation? Or perhaps she was apprehensive and afraid. What if Jin Qinwang took a fancy to her? If it was a woman of low status, even if Jin Qinwang's reputation was unbearable, if she was fancied by him, she would be climbing up a high branch. Moreover, his face was so outstanding that women in the boudoir would be easily bewitched by him. The premise was that he was willing to give her a status. However, up until now, Jin Wangfu did not have any woman with a status, even if she was only a concubine, regardless of her background. Because of all these reasons, no one took the initiative to show off their talents. Li Hongyuan was not in a hurry. He picked up a piece of dessert, took a bite, and threw the rest back. As for the rest in his mouth, he directly picked up the teacup and spat it into the cup. Although there was no expression of displeasure, his actions were enough to show his disdain. With Li Hongyuan's disdain, the people of Duke Ding's Fu naturally hurriedly called for people to change the tea and desserts. Originally, they wanted to put out 10 or 20 types of desserts to let him have a choice, but that would be very unsightly. The servants fearfully put out 5 or 6 types of desserts, and there were still spares at the back. When they saw that the situation was not good, they immediately changed them. However, Li Hongyuan did not find fault and did not even stretch out his hand. That's right, in their eyes, he was just finding fault, and no one thought that he really did not like it. Because it was Li Hongyuan who brought it up, Kang Wang and Rui Wang did not interrupt. They were afraid that if they opened their mouths, this living king of hell would be displeased and turn around to find trouble with them. Li Hongyuan was merciless to Kang Wang, but don't think that he would be merciful to Rui Wang. Seeing that there might be more problems if the deadlock continued, Sun Yijia looked at her biological older brother and the many brothers and sisters who had appeared one after another, perhaps because they had heard about this matter. Originally, there were only a few people who helped to entertain the guests, but now, even those who were a few years old had appeared. She knew that they were all laughing at her fifth brother because her fifth brother's excellence had received too much attention and had become a stumbling block for them. They were jealous and hated him, but there was nothing they could do. Now that they finally had the opportunity, how could they not ruthlessly ridicule him? Sun Yijia turned around and whispered a few words to the maidservant beside her. After the maidservant brought an item over, Sun Yijia stood up and said, "Today, we are fortunate to have the 3 princes grace Duke Ding's Fu with your presence. Your highnesses are in a good mood, and this humble girl is willing to dance a song to liven things up for your highnesses. I hope that your highnesses will allow me to dance." She didn't choose a zither or a painting, but a dance. In front of everyone's eyes, especially when there was a man present, very few unmarried girls chose to dance because it would be seen as frivolous and undignified. In terms of reputation, there was almost no benefit at all, let alone a flower like Sun Yijia who was high up in the mountains. Other than a few people, not many people knew that Sun Yilin could dance. Many people were surprised, but naturally, there were also many people who were waiting to see a good show. They were waiting to see if Sun Yijia could still be as arrogant as before after today. Sun Yijia was really going all out for her older brother. She changed her words slightly and chose the most daring talent. She just wanted the girls behind her to have less scruples and show off their strengths. Even if Prince Jin was the shortest of the shortest, the range of talents should be wider. And with her in front, even if there were some negative comments, it wouldn't affect the girls who were performing. In reality, Sun Yijia's actions were quite effective. Those who were still hesitating before all made a decision in their hearts and appeared to be much more relaxed. Even if they couldn't become Sun Yijia's wife, there were so many noble women present. Perhaps they would like them and form a good marriage. This was what most people thought. Sun Yijia was the prince of the Kang family's second princess consort. He was also very fond of this cousin of his. She was of noble birth and was talented and beautiful. She greatly satisfied his vanity. After marrying her, he would gain a lot of face for himself. He knew her motive. In his heart, he also wanted Sun Yilin to have a good wife because Sun Yilin's help would also be his help. At this time, he naturally couldn't continue to pretend to be deaf and mute. In order to prevent Li Hongyuan from humiliating Sun Yijia, he rushed to say aloud first. Even if Li Hongyuan might find trouble with him afterwards, he didn't care. Li Hongyuan glanced indifferently at the prince of the Kang family. Seeing that he was serious and didn't look sideways, he snorted lightly and didn't comment. However, not far away, Sun Yilin's emotions were complicated and indescribable. He didn't want his younger sister to do these things. He really didn't want to. Sun Yijia held the peeper and walked into the arena. Her legs were staggered, she squatted slightly and held the peeper diagonally. Half of her face was covered and her fingers slid across the strings. The peeper dance began. As her body danced, the peeper's clear notes could be heard from time to time. The scene quieted down and almost everyone stared at Sun Yijia. No matter what they thought of her, they couldn't help but admit that her peeper dance was quite good. Many of the difficult movements were performed very smoothly and beautifully. It wasn't that there weren't any noble maidens who had learned peeper dance, but almost none of them thought that they could do what Sun Ijia did. Even if they didn't want to admit it, the truth was the truth. After the dance, Sun Ijia's face became even redder, making her look even more beautiful. She bowed to the crowd and retreated. Li Hongyuan saw the infatuated look on the prince of the Kang family and said indifferently, "Her figure isn't bad and her looks aren't bad either. I think the feeling of playing with her should be quite good." Li Hongyuan twirled his fingers and looked very interested. What Li Hongyuan was really interested in was what his Wan looked like when she danced. Should he think of a way to get Wan to learn how to dance? Of course, he could save it for when they got married in the future. She could dance for him alone. She could take off her clothes piece by piece as she danced. Just thinking about it made his nose itch and his body heat up a little. The joy of a boudoir was probably nothing more than that. Jingwan naturally didn't know what he was thinking. Otherwise, who knew if she would give him a good beating without caring about her image and status? It was as if a basin of ice water had been poured over Prince Kang's head. He instantly regained his senses. Li Hongyuan, he wasn't the only one who was humiliating Sun Ijia. He was humiliated as well. After all, he had long regarded Sun Ijia as his possession. If he could still tolerate such brazen behavior, then he wouldn't be a man. He roared in a rage. Originally, only the two brothers who were nearby heard his words. This time, everyone's eyes were focused on them again. Sun Ijia had just gone down, and Prince Kang was already like this. Prince Jin must have said something about her. For him to be so angry, it couldn't be anything good. They couldn't help but imagine all kinds of things. Their eyes moved back and forth between the few of them. Chapter 28. Sun Ijia lowered her head slightly and sat quietly. She turned a deaf ear to everyone's gazes. Perhaps the current situation was within her expectations and she didn't care, or perhaps it was something else. Only she knew what she was thinking. I didn't mention any names. Eldest brother, why are you so agitated? Prince Jin said indifferently. You. Prince Kang's eyes were fierce as he glared at Li Hongyuan. If looks could kill, Li Hongyuan would have been cut into pieces. Eldest brother, everyone is watching. Prince Rui reminded him out of kindness. It was just a sentence. If Prince Kang didn't shout it out, no one would know. But now, hehe, Prince Kang finally realized that he had done something stupid because of Li Hongyuan. He suppressed his anger and retracted his gaze. Then, he looked at Prince Rui, who was smiling warmly. Don't think that he didn't see the schadenfreude in his eyes. Eldest brother, sister-in-law isn't dead yet. She's already seriously ill. If she knew that you were hoping for her to die so that someone else could take her place, would she die of anger? She might even leave behind some vicious curse. Can you really hug the new bride with a clear conscience? Imperial father has always said that eldest brother is deeply affectionate and loyal to sister-in-law. You don't even have a secondary consort. Li Hongyuan continued to speak unhurriedly. Sixth brother. Prince Kang gritted his teeth and said, Ijia is only my cousin. Don't spout nonsense. Oh, so the person that eldest brother is thinking about is Miss Sunday. This prince found it strange. The only legitimate daughter of Duke Ding's mansion is 16 years old and hasn't married or even gotten engaged. So she's waiting for eldest brother. She's also deeply affectionate. Could it be that the two of you are in love with each other? In the future, it will be another beautiful story. Li Hongyuan played with his teacup as if he was bored. The sang-froid prince clenched his fists tightly, his veins bulging. It was still the same old saying. There were some things that could not be made public even if everyone knew about them. The sang-froid prince also felt that he was very stupid. He even suspected that this bastard had long planned this and had used some kind of drug on him. Otherwise, how could he have been so agitated by him today that he would be the subject of gossip again and again? It's fine if sixth brother wants to help third brother attack me, but why do you have to involve a girl? Don't you know how important a girl's reputation is? So this king misunderstood. You will not marry Miss Sun? Of course not. When he said this, Prince Kang's heart was bleeding. In the current situation, he had no choice but to make such a choice. Everyone knew that his imperial father didn't know. His imperial father only knew that he was deeply affectionate. If this matter was exposed, he and the Sun family would suffer. After all, his imperial father didn't seem to want him to get closer to Ding General Manor. Good, each and every one of them is very good. After achieving his goal, Li Hongyuan didn't even bother to make a sound. He even leisurely listened to the next girl play the guqin. Prince Kang suppressed the urge to vomit blood in his heart and began to think about who to marry Sun Yijia to. If Sun Yijia were to marry someone else, he might be able to obtain more support. Although if he were to marry her, he would be able to tie Ding General Manor more firmly to himself. Compared to having more support, the latter seemed to be more beneficial. After all, Ding General Manor was his maternal family. Other than himself, who else could they support? And with more support, the possibility of him ascending the throne would be higher. Since things had come to this point, his imperial mother could no longer insist on him marrying his younger cousin. As his thoughts raced, Prince Kang made himself feel a little better. He decided to enter the palace after leaving Ding General Manor and discuss with his imperial mother about the candidate for his younger cousin's husband. However, would the person they chose be able to get what they wanted? Li Hongyuan would tell them how naive they were. Li Hongyuan's purpose in disrupting the marriage between Prince Kang and Sun Yijia was not only to divide Prince Kang and Ding General Manor, but also because of Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin had 2 blood-related elder brothers and 1 blood-related younger sister. Because he more or less blocked his elder brother's path, his relationship with his younger sister was the best. Moreover, the two of them were only 1 year apart. They often played together since they were young, and their friendship was even deeper. Sun Yilin cared about his younger sister more than anyone else in the Sun family. Sun Yilin was a great talent in governing a country. In his previous life, after he ascended the throne, he promoted talents because he was confident in his own abilities. After all, in such a difficult situation, he was able to counterattack and become the final winner. He also became a veritable tyrant. He didn't care about enmity. Moreover, he only destroyed Ding General Manor and didn't exterminate the entire Sun family. Perhaps Sun Yilin cared about the people of the world, or perhaps it was for the sake of the other members of the Sun family, but he came up with many good ideas to govern a country and became his right-hand man. However, there was always a gap between the ruler and his official, and they couldn't get close. Li Hongyuan always thought that he still hated him because of the Sun family. Once, he accidentally mentioned it, but the answer he received was, "Why can't your Imperial Majesty spare my younger sister's life? She's just a woman in the inner courtyard. What can she do?" In his previous life, Sun Yijia married Marquis Kang, and Li Hongyuan became the final winner. He killed Marquis Kang, so naturally, he wouldn't spare his wife and children. Wasn't this what every emperor did? In this life, Li Hongyuan still decided to put Sun Yilin in an important position and wanted him to work harder. Sun Yijia's family was naturally very important, and the person chosen by the Empress and Marquis Kang was definitely not good. As for who Sun Yijia would marry, Li Hongyuan had already decided. Therefore, unless the Empress and Marquis Kang chose the person in Li Hongyuan's heart, they were destined to be in vain. However, they couldn't even think of that person, so naturally, they wouldn't take a look. Then, it was destined that accidents would happen frequently, and they would be badly battered. It might even cause Sun Yijia to lose the value of a marriage alliance. Li Hongyuan's thoughts and eyes were a little scattered. Eunuch Mu was probably the only one who knew who he was looking at. Eunuch Mu looked in the direction of Miss Luo. Because of the direction, he only needed to move his eyes. He didn't even need to tilt his head slightly. It was just that they were a little far apart, so he couldn't see clearly. The girls presented their talents one after another. Other than performances like dancing or playing the zither, which required a longer time to occupy the attention of the audience, other performances like poems and paintings could be completed in the audience. In addition, many people didn't have the mood to do so, so there were more people watching the performances. In fact, it didn't take as long as expected. Jingwan, on the other hand, was watching with great interest. She saw that Luo Jingying had also presented a poem. That slender, elegant, and somewhat shy appearance was quite likable. Jingwan nudged Yuan Xiaoqiao and Ju Yingshuang, who were beside her, and whispered, "Aren't you guys going? Didn't these two also like Sun Yilin?" As a result, the two of them rolled their eyes at her and didn't even bother to say a word. Well, these two were purely infatuated with him, just like the girls in her previous life who clamored to like a certain Prince Charming. Although it was definitely not so exaggerated, at most they would secretly whisper a few words and secretly glance at him. The nature of the two was the same. It had nothing to do with marriage at all. After understanding the thoughts of these two people, she was relieved. She was afraid that they would have the idea of marrying no one but him. That would be terrible. Looking at them again, she sighed in her heart. They were indeed worthy of being noble ladies in ancient times. Each of them was multi-talented. In her opinion, regardless of status, any one of them would be suitable for Sun Yilin. As for men, no matter how outstanding they should burn incense and pray to Buddha if they could marry these girls. How shameless were they to be picky when there were so many girls in their families? Jingwan inadvertently saw Sun Yijia again. Actually, she admired her quite a bit. Of course, her environment had created her proud and aloof personality. Her nature was actually not bad. Furthermore, perhaps she didn't really like Majesty Kang. Perhaps she was just a sacrifice for benefits. Perhaps it was because the Sun family had given her a rich life and a high status, and the husband they chose for her would only make her more noble. She should repay them. This was also the norm now. That was why she didn't resist, didn't fight for it, and silently accepted it. Who had asked her for her true thoughts? Of course, this was only Jingwan's own guess. Could Sun Yijia really be willing? She didn't have the ability nor the obligation to care about others. Chapter 29. These few words made Majesty Kang stand up immediately and kick him. Those who didn't know would think that he kicked him because he couldn't believe that his princess consort was gone. In reality, it was just that Li Hongyuan had just revealed something. Now that she was gone, it was as if someone had slapped him hard in the face. Everything was as if what Li Hongyuan said was true. It was embarrassing. Let's go back. The housekeeper fell to the ground and couldn't get up. He was unlucky. He didn't know the cause and effect. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said it directly. Prince Kang left in a hurry. Not long after, almost everyone knew that Princess Consort Kang was gone. Then, they looked at Sun Yijia with a strange gaze. Finally, she only needed to wait one more year before she could get married. Sun Yijia didn't know, but she still had an arrogant attitude. However, no one knew that her hands, which were hidden in her sleeves, were clenched so tightly that her nails were almost digging into her flesh. After all, she was just a girl in her teens. She had never experienced anything. How could she really not care? She was born into a noble family. She had lived a luxurious life since she was young. She had never thought of being more noble, let alone being a second wife. Even though more than one person told her that she would be the future empress and the most noble woman in the world, so what? It wasn't what she wanted. Moreover, the most noble woman wasn't the most noble person. Her aunt was sitting in that position. Every day that she could sleep peacefully and every day that she didn't have any troubles, her husband only gave her superficial respect. He didn't dote on her at all. Moreover, in other people's eyes, she was probably a woman who stole someone else's husband. In the past, her cousin-in-law liked her very much. However, more than a year ago, her cousin-in-law looked at her with poisonous eyes. At that time, she understood that even if her cousin-in-law knew, others would think that her cousin-in-law didn't know. At that time, she had just found out about her aunt and her family's decision. She was unwilling. She was terrified that she was about to fall into a trap. She also felt deeply guilty towards her cousin-in-law. Before she could express her thoughts, her mother sharply interrupted her. She told her again and again that it didn't matter if she was the second wife, the result was the most important. She would be the empress, her son would be the emperor, and she would be the empress dowager. How laughable. It was still unknown whether or not her cousin, Majesty Kang, could become the emperor. She was still unmarried, but she was already thinking about what would happen decades later. If she did not wait for the results to appear, then it would all be an illusion. They themselves said that the one who had the last laugh was the winner. Then, what right did they have to think that the Duke of Kang would have the last laugh? What right did they have to think that the Duke of Ding would have the last laugh? Even if she married the Duke of Kang and the Duke of Kang ascended the throne, what right did she have to have the last laugh? Nothing is certain in the world. You can't do whatever you want. Sun Yijia thought of her cousin-in-law dying with hatred. Since that time, she didn't dare to see her again. It was not because she was afraid of her hateful eyes, but because she was worried that her cousin-in-law would be angrier and sadder if she saw her, which would worsen her illness. After all, her existence would only be an eyesore to her, as if she was deliberately reminding her of something. If it wasn't for her cousin-in-law herself, she probably wouldn't know how much her cousin-in-law had suffered in the past year. Li Hongyuan stood up slowly and dusted his robes. It looked like he was ready to leave. Sixth brother, what are you? Eldest sister-in-law is dead. As a younger brother, I naturally have to go and comfort eldest brother. Third brother, you've never been good at showing your face. Why are you still wasting your time here? Li Hongyuan was very good at tearing people's faces apart. Lord Rui wanted to slap him to death. As expected, he was happy too early. He could never count on this bastard to stand on his side and help him wholeheartedly. Of course I have to go. It's just that it doesn't seem good for sixth brother to give up halfway. Lord Rui suppressed his anger. I'm not Hugh Larrow. It was enough for him to try his best to matchmake himself and WNWAN. Other people were nothing to him. Whether their marriages were good or not had nothing to do with him. Even if it was Sun Yijia, he would make it up to Sun Yilin sooner or later. What he did, others would have to pay back 10 times or 100 times. If Li Hongming wanted him to do something, he would let him take advantage of him on the surface, but he would make him lose more behind his back. You're just teasing a group of people, aren't you? Lord Rui glared at him fiercely and left in a huff. His mother always wanted him to act like an elder brother. However, this bastard's ability to make people angry and punish people indiscriminately made him unable to pretend anymore. The 3 true Buddhas had left. Today's situation had reached this point. There was no need to continue the banquet. When someone said goodbye, the others also said goodbye one after another. Naturally, the Sun family wouldn't stay for long. They forced themselves to cheer up and see the guests off. When Jingwan was about to leave, she saw Sun Yijia face to face. She was very shocked. Previously, she was a delicate flower in full bloom. Now, she seemed to have lost her moisture. She was stupefied and even had a trace of death. Jingwan instantly understood that she had no interest in Lord Kang. Jingwan wanted to say something, but now was not the time to talk. Sun Yijia seemed to have heard her. She glanced at Jingwan and nodded without any other expression. However, she saw the worry in Jingwan's eyes. Sun Yijia felt a little warm in her heart. At this time, her family didn't notice her situation, but a stranger showed her concern. Although it was just a little, and it might be with the purpose of deliberately getting close to her, it still made her feel better. When only the Sun family was left, several key people gathered in old Madam Sun's courtyard because Duke Ding and his eldest son hadn't gone to the Yamen yet. The close attendant left by Lord Kang told them that Sun Yijia was going to marry someone else. Everyone present had different thoughts. Sun Yilin wanted to comfort his sister, but when he saw the flash of joy on Sun Yijia's face, he knew his sister's real thoughts. He also didn't want Lord Kang to become his brother-in-law. Although there were no concubines in Lord Kang's backyard, there were many concubines and several children. They were definitely not a good match. He thanked Lord Jin in his heart. The angriest person was naturally the Duchess of Ding. First, he made fun of her son. Now, he ruined her daughter's good fortune. She even cursed a few times regardless of her status. Enough. Old Madam Sun reprimanded. She rubbed her forehead with a headache and looked a little tired. Duchess of Ding shut her mouth. Although she controlled the power of Duke Ding, she didn't dare to be rash in front of her mother-in-law. Not only because old Madam Sun was her husband's mother, she had to carefully serve her, but also because she knew how powerful old Madam Sun's methods were. Don't think that she could be underestimated just because she didn't manage things now and only ate vegetarian and recited Buddhist scriptures all day. I know you are worried about the 2 children, but what you did today was really inappropriate. What is Lord Jin's status? He is Jin Shong's son. Is he not allowed for you to say that he isn't? I have another confirmation here. Jin Qinwang did not appoint a candidate for Lin Ji. Don't talk about those useless things now. Wait until Kang Wang Fei's funeral is over, quickly arrange for their marriage. Don't be so picky, it's almost enough. Don't let your girl become an old lady when the time comes, then you will regret it. Grandmother, the Empress and Lord Kang should have other arrangements for Mei Mei's marriage, right? Sun Yilin said bitterly. Duchess of Ding didn't have time to be happy about her son's matter before she heard this. To tell the truth, she couldn't decide her own daughter's marriage. It was fine before, but now it was still like this. No matter what, it wouldn't make people happy. I will go to the palace and talk to the Empress. Thinking about it, the Empress will still give this face. That was her own daughter. Because she insisted on marrying Jiao to Prince Kang, her mother, old Madam Sun, gave in at that time. This time, the Empress had no reason to refute her mother. However, she was afraid that there would be more estrangement between mother and daughter. Grandmother. Sun Yijia was moved and felt guilty. Okay, you can all go back. I'm tired and want to rest. Old Madam Sun waved her hand. They all had to withdraw. Lin Ji, wait a moment. Sun Yilin turned back. What other instructions does grandmother have? Old Madam Sun waved to the other people at the door, letting them leave quickly. After a moment, she opened her mouth. Lin Ji, do you have a girl you like? If you do, just tell grandmother. Grandmother will always fulfill your wish. Several people had already asked whether the female lead was the same person in the 2 lives of the male lead. This question was absolutely correct. The male lead was a psychopath. His obsession with the female lead started from his previous life. If it was someone else, he would definitely know immediately. It was not just for show. The female lead was transmigrated, and the male lead was reborn when he was 10 years old. At the beginning of this article, the female lead was 14 years old, and the male lead was 22 years old. In other words, when the male lead was reborn, the female lead was already 2 years old. Of course, 6 years after the male lead was reborn, he sent someone to the female lead when he left the palace at the age of 16. There was no problem with the timeline. As for the male lead's obsession with the female lead in his previous life, it was almost when the female lead was 17 years old. Chapter 30. Sun Yilin was rather surprised. Grandmother had never cared about the marriage of her grandchildren. Why did she suddenly say this? This was for his own good. For some reason, a barefaced face flashed through his mind. It was not a stunning beauty, but it had the feeling of an expert who had an absolute advantage in some aspects. At that time, she had an unattainable confidence. That kind of unostentatious expression was particularly moving. But this was just a flash. Sun Yilin did not want his mother to meet his grandmother, so he shook his head. It wasn't a bad idea to bury the girl whose name he might have only met once in the bottom of his heart forever. Old Madam Sun did not miss Sun Yilin's reaction at that moment. She was certain that even if he did not like someone, there must be a girl who occupied a slightly special place in his heart. My words are valid before your mother decides on a fiancé for you. Grandmother, can it be sister instead? Girls are always easy to be at a disadvantage. Old Madam Sun waved her hand. The Empress will not agree. Sun Yilin was stunned. But you are not. Don't you know what it means to build one path in the open and another in the dark? I entered the palace only to prevent her from issuing an imperial edict for marriage. I am very clear about the Empress's personality. She will not interfere openly, but she will hint to your father that she will definitely not agree to the person I choose. Even if I insist, she is the Empress. It is too easy for her to secretly arrange a marriage, and we are at our wits' end. If we siblings must at least have a marriage alliance to draw support for the Sangfroid prince, I can do it too. Then, Lin Ji, think carefully. Among the families in the capital, Do the families with marriageable men have an advantage, or do the families with marriageable women have an advantage? Sun Yilin thought carefully and then fell silent. The noble ladies who could match his status were mostly supporters of the other princes. As for those who were neutral and worth roping in, most of the men in the family were marriageable men. His sister was more worthy of marriage alliance than him. They naturally hope that both of you siblings will marry. I first showed a strong stance on Jio'er's marriage and then took a step back. Only then can I interfere in your marriage. Between the two of you, I can only help you. Thank you, grandmother. You can go. Remember my words. Grandson will take his leave. Old Madam's son was a little absent-minded. If old Madame Luo could give up wealth and glory for her granddaughter's sake, why couldn't she think for her granddaughter for once? Yes, she did not believe that Madame Luo did not know about her grandson's situation, so the reason for her refusal was self-evident. When she was young, she wasn't as decisive as her. She wasn't happy all her life. Now, there was no reason for her to be defeated by her. Although this kind of competition was boring and no one would know, old Madame's son still couldn't help but want to do something. Sun Yilin saw Sun Yijia waiting for him outside. Little sister, fifth brother. The brother and sister walked side by side in silence for a long time. Sun Yilin was the first to speak. Regarding Prince Kang's matter before, were you unwilling? Fifth brother, I can see my cousin-in-law with a clear conscience now, even though it's just to send her off. Is it just because of guilt? Sun Yilin's mouth was a little dry. No, maybe it's because I was born noble, so I yearn to be ordinary. In the eyes of many people, this is probably not good for me, but I do think so. Whether it's naivety or ignorance, it's fine, although it's only a thought. Sun Yijia knew that she couldn't escape the fate of marriage. I'm sorry, fifth brother is useless. I can't help you. Because of his eldest brother, he gave in and refused the emperor's promotion. Don't say that. Eldest brother is our elder brother. If you two fight, I'll be sad. But I don't want to retreat anymore. I can't interfere with your marriage, but at least I have to support you in the future. Previously, it was Prince Kang. He bullied you, and I couldn't stand up for you. Now it's different. There's no other prince or prince suitable for marriage. Except for them, I can always think of a way to deal with the others. Sun Yijia suddenly burst into laughter. Okay, I'll wait. However, not long after, they once again knew what it meant to be played by fate. Li Hongyuan probably didn't expect that his interference in Sun Yijia's marriage would cause Sun Yilin to enter the officialdom ahead of time. As for the trouble it brought to him, he didn't think it was important. He had long been used to it and could solve it with a wave of his hand. Jingwan sat next to Madame Luo. Her thoughts were a little scattered. When she thought of Sun Yijia's expression, she felt inexplicably sad. What's wrong with Wan? Are you worried about Princess Ruyu? Madame Luo asked worriedly. Princess Ruyu's father is only a Wang. The reason why she was conferred the title of Princess Ruyu was because the Empress is her aunt. Rather than saying it was out of love, it's better to say it was to save face. After all, with Princess Ruyu's unlikable personality, even a clay figurine would have some temper. There are actually many people who can't get along with her but can suppress her. You don't have to worry too much. Jingwan shook her head and told Madame Luo her conjecture about Sun Yijia. Madame Luo couldn't help laughing. Our Wan is really open-minded. She hasn't even settled her own matters yet, but she still has the leisure to care about others. I just feel that it's a pity for such a proud, beautiful, and outstanding woman. Being born in that kind of family, this kind of thing is inevitable. As long as the elders make a decision, then there's no escaping or hiding. Looking at it, grandmother is still lucky. She chose the right person and got what she wanted. Then isn't I even luckier? Jingwan smiled happily. It's too early to say that. When you reach grandmother's age and have experienced everything, then you'll know whether you're lucky or not. However, grandmother is willing to believe that Wan is a lucky person. Returning to the Luo family, they got off the carriage and the group of people leisurely headed towards the Fu. Luo Jingying timely expressed her worry for Jingwan. Ruyu Junju is unruly, willful, and domineering. She suffered such a big grievance today, so she naturally wouldn't dare to do anything to Jin Qinwang. She will certainly bear a grudge against third Jejie. In the future, she will find trouble with us. What should we do? Deeply worried, actually, I should have told third Jejie about the noble ladies in the capital. If third Jejie knew Ryu Juanju's character, perhaps she would be able to endure it and there probably wouldn't be any trouble. Fourth Jejie, how can you say that? That Ryu Juanju's words were so unpleasant to hear, slandering third Jejie. If third Jejie endured it, it would save you trouble, but it would also ruin your reputation. Can you bear the reputation of hooking up with an outsider? Not to mention a Junju, even a princess would fight back. Is it because we are women of an official's family that we have to swallow everything in silence towards the women of the imperial family? If third Jejie's reputation is ruined, can fourth Jejie gain any benefits? None of the unmarried ladies of our Luo family will be able to escape. Luo Jingyu retorted. Luo Jingying choked again. She could see that Luo Jingyu really relied on Luo Jingwan's presence and started to unreservedly oppose her. What dull and taciturn, she clearly had a sharp tongue. In the past, it was mostly an act. Zumu, granddaughter absolutely didn't mean that. Granddaughter was worried and momentarily muddle-headed, that's why. Luo Jingying hurriedly explained, looking like she was about to cry. Enough, go back to your own courtyard. Old Madame Luo impatiently waved her hand. Not learning the good things, but learning a pile of crooked ways. Chapter 31. Jingwan returned to the Haitang Inn and changed into a more relaxed set of clothes. She then looked at the pots of treasures that she had brought from Qian Prefecture to the capital. Along the way, she did not take good care of them and they looked a little wilted. Jingwan was even worried that they would not survive. However, in the past few days, Jingwan saw that they had regained their vitality. She then looked at the pot of treasured Mo Lan. Because she did not deliberately extend the flowering period, she was surprised to see that it was about to bloom. This was enough for her to throw all of her worries aside. She stared at the orchid attentively. The more she looked at it, the more beautiful it looked. Therefore, Jingwan was the true love-struck fool. After looking at it for a while, Jingwan stood up and asked the servant to prepare the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. She wanted to draw. She wanted to draw the entire process of Mo Lan blooming. In her previous life, she had learned Chinese painting from her grandmother. She also focused on flowers. In order to restore the beauty of various flowers, she chose fine brushwork. 2 years ago, when she first started learning painting in this life, she also used fine brushwork. The teacher praised her talent and others said that she painted well. Jingwan did not think much of it. Jingwan drew the outline of the orchid in detail. From the beginning to the end, she drew 4 pictures in one go. In the process, she did not look at the pot of orchid again. Mima Gong carefully looked at the 4 pictures of the orchid from different angles. Then, she walked around the orchid. Sure enough, the 4 pictures of the orchid were the same as the shape of Mo Lan from different angles. This meticulousness, this amazing memory, and the foundation of painting. Her poetry may not be good, and she may not be good at zither or chess, but no one could deny her excellence. Then, Jingwan added different backgrounds to the orchid and began to color it layer by layer. When she was in Qian Prefecture, as long as she wanted a color, she just had to tell the people below. At least an hour, at most 3 to 5 days, she would be able to get a usable color. If it was not ready-made, she would use other substitutes. Jingwan knew that it was Madame Luo's indulgence. She was grateful and made the best use of these paints that were hard to come by. Therefore, her paintings were always colorful. Although they looked like the same color, they were actually layers upon layers of different paints spread out. Every time a painting was completed, it would always give the greatest visual enjoyment. The image was also very lively. Jingwan spent the rest of the day painting. Aside from eating and resting, she spent most of her time painting. It was only at night that the 4 small pictures of orchid were completed. With her background, it even gave people a dreamy feeling. "Miss, you're really good at drawing." The maidservants might not know how to draw, but they understood beauty and ugliness. They sincerely praised. Mema Gong had seen a lot of good things and couldn't help but praise in her heart. She thought about the booklets of flowers that Miss had made. Every flower was accompanied by exquisite pictures and the most detailed introduction. If those booklets were to be leaked, they would definitely be worth 10 times or even 100 times more than the most valuable flowers that Miss had personally planted. As the saying goes, it is better to teach a man how to fish than to teach him how to fish. But who would be willing to share it with others? Not to mention that it was a painting method that had never been seen before. Those booklets of flowers were the first of its kind. If it had been accumulated for hundreds or thousands of years, its value would be unimaginable. Although money was vulgar, it was the most direct expression of the value of those booklets. In the next few days, Jingwan spent all her time and effort on this. Her grandmother did not accompany her and she did not mention going to the family school. She did not even think about making rouge or face powder. After Madame Luo found out what she was doing, she also let her torment herself. One painting after another, Mo Lan bloomed little by little until it showed the most beautiful posture. There were more than 40 paintings in total. Although the paper was not big, it was still quite tiring. Jingwan was released from that excited state. She estimated that she would not touch a painting brush for at least 10 to 15 days. She sorted them all out and admired them one by one. This time, she was in a good state. Jingwan was very satisfied. However, Jingwan still felt that the most important thing was that the flowers were good. They were deeply liked by her and made her willing to become a flower slave. Jingwan felt that these paintings and the booklets of flowers were enough as a return gift to her grandfather. In the past few days, it was worth mentioning that Duke Dinggua's youngest legitimate daughter, Duke Cheng's wife, Li Ruyu's mother, dragged her sick body back to Duke Dinggua's residence not long after the banquet at Duke Dinggua's residence was over. Someone saw her leave with a pale face and red and swollen eyes. No one would believe that she did not do it on purpose. After all, what kind of place was Duke Dinggua's residence? Was it something that outsiders could casually peek into? Then there was Duke Dinggua's son Yilin's fiancé, who was still undecided. Later, he accepted the position of an official in the inner court. Although he was only a 7th-rank official, because he was always by the emperor's side and was responsible for reading for the emperor in his free time, he often saw the emperor's face. Naturally, he could easily know the emperor's various conditions. It could be said that he was a person that all the big shots had to deal with carefully. He could not be underestimated. Then, there were rumors that he did not get along with his elder brother. Then there was Sun Yijia's selection of a husband. It was unknown whether it was to draw a clear line between her and the Prince of Kang, but the selection of a husband for her was very high profile. Even if a princess was selecting a prince consort, it would probably be the same. Many people were guessing who would be able to pluck this unattainable flower. Although she performed a dance at Duke Dinggua's banquet, there was a reason for it. More people praised her for being affectionate and righteous. The emperor personally decreed that Princess Consort Kang would be buried as the crown princess. Everyone guessed that this was a sign of something. Then, during Princess Consort Kang's mourning period, the Prince of Kang took in a side consort. It was said that Princess Consort Kang had requested before her death. The side consort was her biological sister from her maternal family. She hoped that she could take good care of the children that Princess Consort Kang had left behind. Finally, there was Wu Anho's heir apparent's wedding. The girl he married naturally did not have a high status, but it was still acceptable. In the entire capital, from the nobles to the officials at all levels, almost everyone sent congratulatory gifts. Of course, they did not expect these gifts to be very valuable. If they were generous, they would be average. However, most of the families did not send anyone. Some of them followed the trend and purposely ostracized Wu Anho's residence. Some of them did not want to cause trouble for the Wu Anho's residence. If too many people went, the residents would not be able to receive them properly. It would make everyone feel awkward, and it would also be a slap to the emperor's face. After all, the emperor valued Wu Anho's residence so much. The Luo family naturally belonged to the latter group. One event after another could be said to be brilliant and varied. The Duke Dinggua's residence, in particular, was in the limelight. It was enough to make people talk about it enthusiastically for a long time. Jingwan knew the inside story of the Wu Anho's residence. She sighed and had the idea of cooking the hound after the cunning rabbit was killed, although the process was a little longer. After the founding of the Duke Dingwa's residence, it ended up like this. In her opinion, it would be better to directly decline like the other families. At least the people were still there. Of course, this was only Jingwan's own opinion. She had not experienced it, so she did not dare to speculate. In the past few days, other relatives came one after another, but Madame Luo did not ask her to meet any guests. After Luo Shangshu was sent to the Yamen, Jingwan packed up and went directly to the study with her things. Jingwan did not know that her grandfather was working so hard to teach his children and grandchildren after being sent to the Yamen. After she was allowed to enter the study, she saw her father, uncles, and brothers standing there as if they were being punished. She could not help but hesitate. Should she go back first and find another time to come again? Unfortunately, Luo Peishan had already let her in. How could he let her leave without saying anything? In just a few seconds, Jingwan calmed down. Under everyone's gaze, she greeted him politely. "What's the matter, third girl?" Luo Peishan asked, and his eyes fell on the tray in her hand. "Didn't I get grandfather's treasure? I also want to show my filial piety." She put the tray in front of Luo Peishan. Chapter 32. Jingwan didn't disturb him. When he finished reading all 40 pictures, a lot of time had passed. The people around the table stretched out their heads. If the things were not in Luo Peishan's hands, they would have reached out to grab them. Jingwan had already retreated to the side to admire the various decorations in the study. There were 2 volumes below, each of which was 2 fingers thick. After flipping through 2 or 3 pages, Luo Peishan suddenly closed them. This was a good thing, a treasure. He had to keep it for himself. He raised his head and looked at his children and grandchildren. Suddenly, he became impatient and waved his hand, "Go away." Although unwilling, he didn't dare to disobey Luo Peishan's words. He obediently went to the side, but his eyes kept glancing at the table. "Third girl, come to grandfather." Luo Peishan was full of smiles. Jingwan could deal with the serious and meticulous grandfather easily. Now, he was smiling like an old fox. Jingwan was a little hesitant. If Luo Peishan knew Jingwan's thoughts, he would be depressed. He was smiling amiably because he didn't want to scare his granddaughter. "Third girl, where did these come from?" "I painted them myself. I don't know what to give to grandfather. Apart from the flowers I raised, this is the only thing I can give. Because I only brought a few pots of flowers to the capital, the journey was bumpy. Plus, I was in poor health and neglected to take care of them. Some of them are not very good. I need to rest for a while, so I chose this. I hope grandfather doesn't dislike it." How could he dislike it? Even Nurse Gong could think of the value of these pictures. How could Luo Peishan not think of it? Moreover, he thought of more. Not to mention the future, the value of these pictures was quite high. If they were given to people who liked painting and flowers, they would be priceless. "I didn't expect the third girl to have such painting skills. Did you create this painting method yourself?" A new painting method was bound to be passed down through the ages. Although it couldn't reach the level of the founder, it was enough for future generations to remember. "Hey, isn't this painting technique very common?" Jingwan was a little confused. Luo Peishan immediately understood that his old wife had concealed this matter in order to protect her granddaughter. The title of a talented woman was not necessarily a good thing. If it was a man doing this, he would definitely gain both fame and fortune. But for a woman, perhaps she would attract the attention of others and be measured like goods. The world was just so unfair. Seeing Jingwan frown slightly, it was obvious that she had understood the key point. Have any paintings been leaked? No. She had only ever painted flowers, and she herself was not someone who liked to show off. In addition, she thought that all outsiders knew how to paint. Naturally, when she was in Qian Manor, other than a few people in the manor, no one knew that she could paint. Luo Peishan nodded. If there was, His wife would deal with it. What do you think? Jingwan didn't think much. She faintly looked at her father, Luo Rongyan, paused, and finally looked at her brother, Luo Jingbua. Luo Peishan nodded. She was indeed a sensible child. Such a good opportunity to become famous, but she was not tempted and knew the stakes. Not to mention people of her age, too many people who had experienced the ups and downs of the world might not be able to keep their hearts. The others present also understood that she wanted to give this credit to her brother. It was not impossible to give it to her father, but once this new painting method was spread, it would bring honor and prestige. Her father's temperament was indifferent to fame and fortune, so he might as well give it to Luo Jingbua to earn some capital. Next, learn painting from your sister. If you don't learn well, how can you take her things? Luo Peishan said to Luo Jingbua with a straight face. Just like Jingwan, he didn't ask for Luo Rongyan's opinion. Fortunately, Luo Rongyan really didn't care. However, Luo Rongyan also coveted the orchid paintings and the beauty charts. Luo Jingbua also felt uneasy when such benefits fell on his head for no reason. Grandfather, isn't this not very good? Sister will suffer too much. This is the best way to deal with it. I don't care about these things, so third brother doesn't have to care too much about it. If you really feel guilty, third brother can treat me better in the future. Jingwan said with a smile. What else could Luo Jingbua say? Naturally, he repeatedly promised. It was as if he was willing to sacrifice himself for Jingwan. In this way, the matter was settled. Whether the others were envious or jealous, they could only hide it in their hearts. They couldn't say a word to outsiders. Luo Peishan was also a love-struck fool. He cared more about the beauty charts. Third sister, are there only these 2 beauty charts? There are 18 completed volumes. There are still some unfinished ones. Luo Peishan didn't feel that Jingwan had given him too little. Grandfather, I'll let you have a look at the rest. I'll have someone make a copy. I don't need yours. I'll have someone send them over when I go back. It doesn't matter if grandfather keeps them. I'll make another one. Originally, I was going to give all of them to grandfather, but because there are too many and they're quite heavy, I can't carry them all at once. Besides, what if grandfather doesn't like them? That's why I didn't bring them all. In Jingwan's view, these weren't disposable things. If they ran out, she could just make another one. Don't like them? How could he not like them? Not to mention those who loved flowers. As long as it was a scholar, there wouldn't be anyone who didn't like them. Luo Peishan thought about it. These beauty charts might be of great use, so he didn't refuse. However, he couldn't take so many good things from his granddaughter for free. Even if he had to throw away his old face, he still had to get a few pots of treasures back for her. Let him think about it. Which families were famous for their treasures? The Prime Minister of the Cabinet, Wan Ruiz Hong, claimed to have collected all kinds of chrysanthemums in the world. The chrysanthemums he took out every year at the chrysanthemum banquet were indeed coveted. However, that old man didn't get up early without benefits. It was slightly difficult to get something from him. The Chancellor of the Supreme Court, Diwu Taiching, that sissy old man, had the most camellias in his house. However, he had always been very protective of his family's famous products. It was very difficult for others to take a look at them. If they wanted his camellias, they had to exchange them with other famous products. There was also the Minister of the Ministry of Works, who was in a high position before the age of 40. He had the most plum blossoms transplanted in his house. There were more varieties than the ones in Erz's courtyard. There were even a few rare treasures. Unfortunately, he was a smiling tiger. It was difficult to get one of his plum blossoms. There was also Sun Yilin from Ding General Manor. He seemed to have collected all 4 famous peonies. Ding General Manor didn't have anything. Therefore, as that boy's treasure, no matter what the conditions were, he wouldn't exchange it. That was the most difficult thing to get. However, that boy had a lot of other famous products. Perhaps he could think of a way. Luo Peishan thought about it while admiring the orchid painting. The more he looked, the more wonderful it was. It was so lifelike and dreamlike. However, third girl, why does grandfather find this orchid quite familiar? Grandfather just gave it to me a few days ago. Don't you recognize it? That's Molan. It actually bloomed. It was no wonder that Luo Peishan didn't recognize it. The main reason was that the background was too confusing. Everyone in the room had seen that Molan, but no one recognized it. However, when Jingwan said so, it looked like it. When I ask someone to send the Chuanfeng Fu, I'll show it to you. Okay. That's Molan hadn't been in Luo Peishan's hands for a long time. As far as he knew, the flower bud had been in his hands for a long time. However, it didn't bloom because it was the first time this Molan bloomed. The person who planted it didn't know what was going on. Then, Jingwan began to explain to Luo Peishan the many varieties of orchids, their habits, cultivation methods, what soil to use, how to change the pot, how to split the plant, their flowering period, and even some small methods to extend the flowering period. Of course, this wasn't all the knowledge accumulated from the previous life. After all, it was two completely different dynasties. The timeline might be thousands of years apart, and even different worlds. It was also related to the optimization of species. What Jingwan said was combined with the knowledge of this life. She had read a lot of books and summed it up. There was no situation where it was not applicable. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.